نجحت مساعي عبد الناصر في منع انضمام أي دولة عربية إلى حلف بغداد منذ إنشائه في 17 من فبراير عام 1955. كان نجم ناصر متصاعدا، وقدرته على تحريك قطع الشطرنج على رقعة الإقليم تنضج. بعدها ب3 أيام فقط كان ناصر على موعد مع رجل يزوره للمرة الأولى والأخيرة.
When Eden first met Nasser or knew about him, he was suspicious of his Nasser's nationalist aspirations.
المقابلة اللي حصلت سنة 55 ما بين إيدن وعبد الناصر يمكن هيأت للحدث اللي حصل في 56.
But he thought he was someone that he could do business with.
To rework what Margaret Thatcher said later about Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s.
إيدن حاول إن هو يتودد إلى عبد الناصر بإنه يحييه باللغة العربية، ودي علامة تودد واضحة ومؤكدة.
Nasser was surprised that Eden was a fluent Arabic speaker at this meeting.
Nasser was also speaking in a dialect that Eden was trained in Arabic, but he was trained in classical Arabic at Oxford. And so Eden doesn't quite understand what Nasser's saying. And Nasser's not going to speak in classical Arabic.
عبد الناصر لم يبادله هذه المشاعر.
Eden was a very superior person. It was a part of that generation of high-class diplomats and politicians here that they thought themselves very superior when it came to dealing with.
And there's a space of maybe 24, 48 hours. And then you have that personal reaction by his wife saying, oh, he didn't treat you as an equal. And indeed, he didn't look up to you, which is the way it should have been. His wife is the niece of Winston Churchill. She's a very confident individual, shall we say, very forceful. And she thinks that Nasser has disrespected her husband. She thinks that Nasser did not dress up for the occasion. He's not wearing his dress military uniform, but his conventional officer's uniform. Anthony Eden is there decked down in a tuxedo and, sort of dressed to the nines.
But Nasser felt offended. He thought he was being patronized, and he was, in a sense. And Eden didn't know he was doing it.
عبد الناصر عانى من الفترات الاحتلال وخرج مظاهرات ضد الاحتلال الإنجليزي، وعانى من الحصار في الفلوجة، ومر بخبرات يعني صعبة كتير. يبدو أنه هو كان متأصل بداخله أنه بريطانيا دولة محتلة، احتلت مصر واستنزفت ثرواتها لفترات طويلة، ويعني لا يمكن أبدا أن يكون هناك نوع من التوافق أو التصالح أو حتى المساومة، وظهر وكأنه يقف له بشكل ندي بندية.
His views in the years leading up were very diplomatic, very assured and understanding of the Egyptian position, but then turning against Nasser very suddenly.
There's a slight disjunction that turns into a personal crisis when Clarissa Eden says to him, you let him get away with that. You let him treat you badly. And Eden takes that on board.
حصل جرح نرجسي عند إيدن في هذه المقابلة، إنه أنا أمثل بريطانيا العظمى وأنت تمثل دولة إفريقية صغيرة كانت عبارة عن مستعمرة لبريطانيا العظمى.
Nasser's his own person. Nasser wants an Egypt which is answering to no one in terms of its international position and in terms of its domestic policies. As we find out, this becomes in part a personal story between Anthony Eden, who's now the prime minister rather than the foreign minister, and the new president, Jamal Abdel Nasser. And that personal relationship is part of a rapidly changing Egypt and Middle East where Britain cannot assume that it is the dominant power.
دفع إيدن بالعلاقات المصرية لنقطة الانكسار تلك. كان عليه أن يظهر للجميع حوله أن لبريطانيا رئيسا للوزراء قادرا على التصرف بصرامة. لكن الشبح الذي حاول إيدن الهروب من عباءته كان المسيطر الحقيقي على عقله.
There are two very different Anthony Edens when it comes to Egypt. I mean, there's the Anthony Eden who is foreign secretary in the Churchill administration between 1951 and 1955, who is really coming to grips with a different type of British presence in Egypt.
And he'd been foreign secretary on and off for a long period of time, pre-war and all that. And he was always second to Churchill, and he'd been waiting too long. He wanted to assert himself.
But there's a different Anthony Eden from the time he becomes prime minister in 1955.
مطلوب منه يملأ فراغ بعد تشرشل. ده صعب جدا ان اي حد شخص عادي او حتى شخص متميز يقدر يملأ هذا الفراغ بعد تشرشل، وخاصة ان تشرشل جه في ظروف اعطت لملكاته وقدراته الفرصة لان تظهر وتتبدى امام العالم كله. لما يجي إيدن بعده يبقى في أزمة، على الرغم من انه إيدن كان معروف بانه سياسي مرموق جدا وسياسي داهية.
Anthony Eden did understand the Middle East very well, probably better than most British statesmen ever have or ever will. But he got it wrong when it mattered most, when he was Prime Minister.
His relationship with people overseas was to establish his authority. He was another politician like Churchill, strong man, wanting to get things done and all the rest of it.
Safeguarding Britain's role in the world. And very quickly, he's finding that the course of Middle Eastern events are going to make that very difficult. Instead of Eden the pragmatist, say up to the start of 1955 when it comes to Egypt, by March 1956, we have Eden the emotional, hypersensitive leader who wants to assassinate Nasser.
وصل إيدن لحد البحث عن قتل عبد الناصر. لم يكن خيارا تقليديا لسياسي بارز، لكن خصمه لم يكن تقليديا أيضا. رجل نشأ في خضم أكبر صراع تشهده المنطقة العربية، اندفع بقواته يوما ما لحل المشكلة، فوجد نفسه محاصرا لأيام. في تلك الأيام سيتشكل عقل ناصر الضابط والرئيس.